Casey, you have a stink list, right?
I do.
All right.
Let's set that up.
Now, here's the thing about this stink list that I want to say. At the beginning of the year, I thought it was laugh out loud funny. I told people in the office, like, well, let Casey keep doing it. I mean, at some point, some of this stuff is a little absurd, but you know what? Hey, it's entertaining if nothing else. Having said that, Casey, this stink list has to get pretty refined at this point. I mean, it's almost like making a stink list or having the answers after basically the teacher gives out all the answers in class, right? It's like we seem to already know what's happening in the NFL and who's good and who's not. So if this stink list isn't good, then I really, really have a hard time understanding how it's difficult to put a list together, Casey. So let's see what you got.
You want me to tell you the movement? Who's moved around?
Well, I see that the Bengals have slid up pretty far. I mean, you have them as the second best team in the NFL. Is that how we're doing this, or you just threw them up there?
Bills and Bengals are 1 and 2. San Francisco is 3. Dallas is 4. And this is just because Jalen Hurts is hurt, honestly. Eagles at 5. Kansas at 6. Vikings at 7. Chargers at 8, and the rest are pretty much irrelevant.
You think the Ravens are worse than the Panthers?
Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
They almost lost to the Panthers.
But they did it. they almost lost, but they did it.
The Panthers are playing better. They played the Panthers when they were at their worst. Like, literally the week after we slaughtered them, and they almost lost to that team.
And teams normally come back. I mean, that's
Are we still buying stock in the Cowboys? I'll be honest with you, man.
Yeah.
They're but their defense has been getting shredded. Casey.
They've been giving up 30 points a game. The thing about this Cowboys team is, more than in years past, they seemed primed to make a decent playoff run because of the overall status of the NFC. But mostly, they seem the most complete team since Dak was a rookie. Is that fair to say? Like they were a decent team for the past few years now, but they were loaded back when Dak was a rookie, and they didn't ask him to do a whole lot. They're asking him to do more, and the biggest weakness of their team seems to be Dak Prescott.
Well, I think now that this is the most complete roster they've had since that rookie campaign.
I would agree with that. I think that the Cowboys are capable of winning the Super Bowl. Do I think they will? No. And that largely just goes into the idea of I don't know if they're playing their best ball at the end of the year. So, all right, that's good for the stink list. I think that that's relatively decent. I actually don't have that many problems with that quote-unquote stink list. I have a question for Bengals fans. You guys can pop in the chat. You guys are Bengals fans over there. You know your team well better than I do. What are players that you think that you would like to have re-signed that are of value? Obviously, don't give me Joe Burrow. I know that.
Right.
But do you got guys that you're like, hey, this guy is very valuable. I don't know if we appreciate him enough, and we need to re-sign him before either they have another great season and then they become kind of a situation where they know what their market would be if they left as a free agent, or someone that you just don't care what their market is. You want them on the team regardless.
Well, the big odd man out, obviously, is Tyler Boyd on the weapons, wide receiver weapons. I mean, T. Higgins, if you're going to pay 2 wide receivers, the money clearly goes to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I've had this take for the longest time, and I will stand by it, that if you pay a running back, and they've already paid Joe Mixon, and it's worked out all right. It's actually worked out more than fine. But if you pay a running back, you are foolish, because running backs, they come and go. They have in the NFL for 20 years now, with the exception of Adrian Peterson. They come, they go, draft a new one every 3 years in the second round. Go ahead and look up the best running backs in the NFL. Almost all of them, excluding Saquon Barkley, are second or later round draft picks. That's because more running backs are made by their offensive line than the other way around. Running backs do not make a good offensive line. Running backs are made by the offensive line. And I think the same goes on the defensive side for linebackers. I think middle linebackers are the running backs of the defensive side. So Logan Wilson, who is my favorite defensive player by a good margin, it seems like every time you're watching a play happen, he's in on the play. Every turnover, every big tackle for loss, he's right there, and he seems to be the lifeline of this defense. I don't know if I re-sign him. I don't know what the going rate for a linebacker is, but if it's going to take a serious hit on your cap room, then I go for another linebacker.
So we have, first off, we have Pratt this season. We have Pratt to
Jermaine Pratt.
resign, and then Logan Wilson the following. And both, like last year, it was Logan Wilson's kind of year to shine. This year, it's been kind of Jermaine Pratt's year to shine. In my mind, I do think both are. You can choose one or the other. I just don't know which one you choose though, because both are so. Both have played so well and played well together that I'm not sure if it's worth the risk to split them. Now, it all depends on how much. Like, if every single person that we're going to talk about is getting top market money, then yeah, you don't pay linebacker. That's the smart thing to do, is not pay linebacker or running back. And of course, we already talked about the Tyler Boyd thing, but my number one out of the rest of those coming up in the next couple years, to me, probably has to be like Reeder or Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Those two are too valuable to this team. I think the third that we just don't give enough credit for is Jesse Bates. And I know we're not going to have him probably after the season.
Yeah, he's gone.
But I feel like the way that Lou Anarumo's defense works is that the secondary is just so in tune with the defense. Everyone is so in tune with how to operate. And he's been in this system for 4 or 5 years now. However long Anarumo's been here. I think it's 3.
His first year was really bad. He's been here with Zach the whole time.
Well, regardless, I'm just saying he's been very decent back there, especially this year. Like, I think he's played pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll get top market money, but
yeah, the problem is what safety signed this offseason and just got buku bucks for a safety. And then Jesse Bates. Yeah, Fitzpatrick gets just buku bucks for a safety. So then Jesse Bates, who, if you look at PFF, if you get the murmurs around the league, he's on the same level as Fitzpatrick. So he's there looking, and rightfully so. If that's the going rate for my play, I deserve that money. But I think the Bengals will be better off spending it elsewhere.
I actually got my hot take here.
Go ahead.
My number one guy I'm re-signing in 2023 in the offseason, Eli Apple.
Eli Apple's played well. Listen,
100%. You're not getting him at market value. You're not going to get him at the high market value. You're going to get him at like a
second or third string. Yep.
You can get him for a couple years. The dude is playing awesome.
Yeah, he's
Go look up his stats. He's playing
well.
Awesome.
Listen, in an NFL roster, the most important position, and this is no breaking no new ground, quarterback. Second most important position are the tackles. The third most important position is the pass rush. And the fourth most important position are the corners. After that, it's wide receivers, and then fill in the rest where you see fit. So that's the way in which you pay guys. Joe Burrow gets paid the most. I think Joe Burrow, you got to pay Jamar Chase a lot. I don't think there's any tackles on this team worth giving big bucks to yet. Maybe we draft one that we find one in the next coming years. Jonah Williams certainly ain't it. La'el Collins already got a free agent contract. Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard, pay them. Pay your cornerbacks. Still draft, because I still think we need a lockdown guy. We've got a very solid cornerback secondary unit, but we still need a lockdown.
You always get to draft every year too, right? I mean,
Right.
You're always going to get opportunities to get guys that come in the building that you didn't expect to be as good as possibly they were drafted at. Yeah, I know everyone brings up the fact they missed on Jackson Carman, but who's the kid that they got in the 4th or 5th round that turns out that he's playing pretty well? Yeah, so Volson. Sometimes that's the way the NFL draft goes, right? I mean, you get a guy in the 5th round that probably is more of a 2nd round or 1st round talent, and the guy that you drafted in the 2nd round is not worth a damn. One thing about the Bengals that I seen a stat the other day or was brought up that I thought was interesting was, and sometimes in sports you can't explain things exactly, but you almost know they exist. So back when Marvin Lewis had, Zimmer, right?
Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, Mike Zimmer.
So I think Zimmer was the defensive coordinator back when they had a top 2 or 3 ranked defense in the entire league.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It seems like this defense, although statistically they're not as good, it seems like this defense finds a way to make the play when it matters the most. They find a way to get the turnover when you need it the most. They find a way to get the stop at the end of the game when you have to have it. And I don't know where that comes from. I'll turn it over to you guys.
There's no way to
I would
quantify
ask
that, right?
you. I would ask you. Do you see that? Do you feel that as a fan?
Yeah.
And what is that? Is there a way to extract what that actually is? Is it just leadership? Is it culture? Is it the expectation that things are going to go right? Like, is it just mojo? Because there for the longest time in Cincinnati, right? You're just waiting for something to happen, and that's my biggest kind of grief with Sejo from time to time here. It's like, listen, man, I know there's been some bad stuff that's happened to Cincinnati sports, but at some point, the mindset has to shift from what's bad going to happen to when's the next good thing going to happen. Because that seems like that's happened in the Bengals organization.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to go first? Do you want?
Go ahead.
I'm going to answer the one question about the defense. That defense with Mike Zimmer also was very good at sacking the quarterback. They were one of the best teams in the league at sacks. They had Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, and Michael Jordan all playing at a very high level. Michael Jordan. Michael Johnson? That's his name, Michael Johnson. And this style of defense is not predicated on pressuring the quarterback as much as it is just playing really good coverage, coming up to make the tackle, really clean tacklers. It's two different play styles. And honestly, I would rather have the defense we have now. I think they've proven that they can win out and win the big game. You know, I don't know if that style where you're pressuring the quarterback a ton when you don't have a very good coverage secondary, if that's necessarily good enough to get you to the Super Bowl. I'm sure there's been plenty of times where both defenses have worked, but in more recent memory, to me, this style of defense reminds me, and this is the hot take of the year, right? I really do believe Anarumo sat down, watched hours and hours of film of Bill Belichick and what he does on defense, because there was even a quote in the presser like a week ago, and they were talking about how Anarumo's defense reminds them of a Bill Belichick ran defense where they have multiple different looks. They're not just set in like cover 3. They run cover 2 man, 3, cover 4, cover 6. Too high shell, they'll disguise coverages, and they adapt and mold. And that's just what seemed like Bill Belichick would do every game. He would always have the great adjustments at halftime. Tom Brady would come back and win the game. And that's kind of the recipe that I feel like has worked in the past. Bengals just said, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to get a quarterback that can move the ball, play really good offense, efficient. We're going to play really good, efficient defense.
Really quickly on Anarumo, you've heard my take about the second half thing. I do think that's overblown. I don't know if Anarumo is overblown. I think that there's something to the idea of having unity on the defensive side of the ball, being able to have stability there, being able to kind of create a culture within a certain, because football is very siloed, right? Like, the defense and the offense are almost two separate, completely different teams. They practice together on one side of the field, the other team practicing on the other side of the field. It's not like it's basketball where you're intermixing constantly with all of the team. So I do think there's something to the idea where the defensive coordinator should get some of the credit for, obviously, the performance, and it's not just one of those things where it's just the players on the field. Having said that, though, is there an opportunity, and really quickly, Casey, cue up the chat's asking about the Whitworth thing. We have a clip of Zach Taylor in his Whitworth comments, I do believe, that we'll run here in just 1 second. But the last thing with the Anarumo thing, and we'll jump into Zach Taylor's comments on Whitworth, is this. I think genuinely there are certain people in life that realize they're comfortable, they're happy where they're at, and if you show that they're appreciated, and you let them know that you really enjoy them being there, and you can compensate them to prove that, I think that there's an opportunity where they won't make that jump to being a head coach. Now, I don't know Anarumo. Maybe he has aspirations of being an NFL head coach. But I also think that there's something to the idea if you could find a way to pay them, and maybe you can't pay them exactly what they would make as a head coach, but if you can get it close, there's something to the idea of being comfortable within a system, within an organization. I mean, if you're Anarumo, do you really want to jump and go become the head coach of the Colts?
So you think Anarumo's gone, or you think,
I'm saying that
he's
he's
going to
be
target.
He's going to be offered a job. He's going to be offered a job. Now, whether or not it's a job that he wants, I don't know. But what I'm saying, if you're Cincinnati, you try to get out in front of this and you try to say, hey, listen, we know that somebody's going to probably come and try to poach you away. And that's fine. If those are your aspirations and that's what you want to do in your life, by all means, go try to chase that dream. But we think that you're special at doing this specific job, and we think we have a special group of guys that can win a Super Bowl. And if you're in this profession, you don't get an opportunity to win a Super Bowl all that often. You don't. And if you have an opportunity to do it with this bunch, this group of guys, I would think that you might be able to convince Anarumo to stick around just a few more years. If you're successful, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be there. You're always going to have the opportunity to make that next step, right? Look at a guy, and again, I go back at all my times here. I don't want to be a homer here, but go back and look at Kirby Smart. I mean, he stayed at Alabama for 10 years. The guy got offered head coaching jobs in college 6 years in a row. Stayed at Alabama because they had an incredible system, and he was waiting for the perfect opportunity. So if I'm the Bengals, I try to get out in front of it. I try to say, hey, listen, we value you here. We want to offer you as much money as we possibly can, and we want you to be around here for the prime of our little run. And I don't want to say little because, you want it to be extended. But let's face it. You got a bunch of really good players on rookie contracts. This opportunity doesn't come around all that often.